Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Pursuit Live. I'm your producer, Chris. It's a great day to be back in the studio. I've missed you all. Unfortunately, we have some bad news to announce. Rob and I have officially voted Dave off the island, so he will no longer be joining us. Let's have a quick moment of silence for Dave. I'm just kidding. Dave has the night off. So it's well-deserved. Dave's been working hard. So joining me tonight as our guest host is our program manager, Rob. Rob, thanks for joining us. As always, bailing out Dave. We got a great show for you tonight. We have Kelcey Burguess, the owner of Swizzlestick Wildlife Treats and former State Wildlife Biologist. So, Kelcey, thank you for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome.
So, a couple of quick things. Tonight's show is brought to you by Cutright Mobile. The Cutright Mobile app, elevate your wild game experience, all right? This app provides expert video instruction on field dressing, butchering, and cooking from a friend of ours, our personal friend of the show, Mike Edgehouse, and Got Game Tech. You can get the app in the App Store, Cutright Mobile app. Can't miss it. We use it. We love it. Please check it out if you can. Additionally, I'm here to announce publicly, this July, I was elected to the board of directors for the Dallas Safari Club. Now, everybody knows I am a member of the Dallas Safari Club Northeast chapter, and being elected to their board of directors is a huge honor for me. So I want to give a quick shout out to the DSC and all the DSC members out there. Thank you for your vote of confidence. Hopefully, I will serve you well and bring my love of not just safari hunting, but conservation to a wider audience. With that, I do want to announce DSP Northeast is bringing, again, this year, our annual banquet. 2025 annual banquet will be held at the Avon Old Farm Hotel, Avon, Connecticut, on Saturday, September 13th. Go to dscnortheast.org to get your tickets now. Tons of giveaways, tons of raffles. Guns, ammo, Yeti coolers, gear, trips, you name it. We're giving it away. All right, please. ESCNortheast.org. Check it out. Get your tickets now. They are going fast, but there is still space available, so get them while you can. I don't know about you guys. I got the housekeeping out of the way. You guys ready to dive right into this?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So I kind of want to start out tonight, Kelcey. Now, one of the things that we always like to find out is how our guests got into the outdoors in the first place. So if you could kind of tell us like your first experiences in the outdoors and how you started on this journey that you're on.
I grew up in the outdoors, had a very outdoor oriented family. My father took me deer hunting when I was a little kid, constantly out in the yard shooting, had a BB gun when I was a little kid. My earliest memories of hunting with my dad were going woodchuck hunting, in the local farmers' fields. That was always the big thing to do during the summer nights, just before it got dark. And then, from there, I got into a shooting program, YHEC, Youth Hunter Education Challenge from the NRA, and was pretty successful there. Won a national championship in '86, and that kind of boosted my interest in doing stuff in the outdoors and shooting and firearms and archery and all sorts of things. And so all through high school I was doing that, and I really didn't know what to do with my future. And actually, it was the local conservation officer who was one of my coaches for our team. He knew Gary Alt, and who was the bear biologist for the state of Pennsylvania. And I had gone to Penn State and East Stroudsburg University to get my biology degree and wildlife tech degree from Penn State. Had to do an internship, and because of my shooting experience, that actually led me down the road to working with Gary Alt, and he actually gave me my first experience working with black bears. I had to do an internship, which was supposed to be just working with one of his technicians, but his technician quit that summer, and instead of hiring a new technician, he just asked me if I wanted the job. So he needed me a drug kit and a dart gun and a bunch of Aldrich foot snares and a crappy Chevy Blazer, and said, "Good luck. See you at the end of the summer." And that was the best summer ever. I got to tell you, he spent one day teaching me how to catch bears and how to tag them and tranquilize them, and literally cut me loose. And that was an awesome time. So that's how I kind of started down the road of being a biologist. Got my master's degree at East Stroudsburg University, developing a DNA technique for doing population work with black bears, which at the time was non-existent. They were just doing DNA fingerprinting with humans, not with animals at that point in time, which then led me to working with my major professor at East Stroudsburg. Her husband worked for the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife. And as they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know sometimes. And, they helped me get in the door there. And next thing I knew, I was running the bear program in New Jersey. So that's kind of how I got where I was at. And now I'm here today. So that's the short version.
Well, I mean, that's it, folks. Thank you. You heard it here. So have a good night.
That's all there is.
So I got to ask you, and I guess it's kind of interesting. So stumbling into wildlife biology, is this really something that, like, as a kid, like, did you say, I want to be a biologist? This is what I want to do. How did you really, like, find yourself on that path?
That's a good question. I was the first kid in my family to go to college, on either side of the family. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I actually, after doing my chores at the farm the one night, I got on my four-wheeler and I rode down to the local beaver dam. So I always liked walking, going down there and checking out what the beavers were doing. And I sat there watching them for a couple hours, build the dam. And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with wildlife, so I went to the career counselor and I said, I want to work with wildlife. And no one really thought, I wasn't a valedictorian or the smartest kid in the class or anything. I was average, nothing too special. And so they're like, well, why don't you go to a 2-year school? So I actually went to Penn State Du Bois, which at the time was more highly ranked than the 4-year main campus wildlife program. And I learned a lot from those professors. I spent 2 years there, hands-on, working with, forestry aspects of wildlife, land management, obviously with wildlife. That's where I really developed the passion for what I wanted to do. And again, what really set it in stone was I was lucky enough to, because of my work with, shooting, I got that internship with Gary Alt, and he is and still is a major mentor for me. He really helped push me down the road, wanted me to go to grad school, helped me get into grad school. And it just, when the doors open, you just got to walk through the door, and then that's kind of what I did. So it's been a good ride. I've enjoyed it, still enjoy it. And a bigger aspect of wildlife management for me is educating people about what wildlife is. And there's so much to know. Not one person knows everything. So everyone's got their little niche that they know. But you're always learning. There's always something interesting. And unfortunately, the animals have never read the book. So all those books that are out there that have all the information about being experts, the animals don't believe that either. So they're always coming up with new interests to teach us people. So that's the challenge part of it. So.
Okay. Now I kind of want to fast forward just a little bit. Now, getting into biology and wildlife management at a governmental level. Getting into that, like, early in your career, did you think that was where you wanted to wind up, or is that just something that kind of progressed, and once you got on the trail, you just never got off?
Yeah, once you get on the trail and the doors open, you kind of, wherever the good Lord decides to take you, that's where you're going to go. The one thing I will mention, especially for any kids that might be interested in going into the wildlife field, it doesn't pay great. You're never going to be a multimillionaire in the wildlife field. aside from that, you're probably never going to know any bigger joy of doing something important than managing a wildlife species. Knowing that you're doing something that's going to make that wildlife species be there for future generations. So there's a trade-off there. And the other big thing that I learned during my career, I had an incredibly challenging career, working here in New Jersey with politics. You can't get away from politics and wildlife. Wildlife as themselves, 99% of the time, can probably manage themselves just fine. It's when people get involved and screw things up, that's when wildlife starts having an issue or having a problem. So you take people out of the factor, and wildlife and nature is going to go back to an even balance, and they're going to do just fine. Throw politics and people into it, especially 9 million people here in New Jersey, and you're bound to have problems. And there's a lot of issues that took place. Anyone that followed the bear issues here in the state of New Jersey over the course of the last 25 years knows how much politics has affected the management of bears here in the state. And for me to sit there and tell you that what most folks think is, what it should be, where the science dictates what happens, is not the case. It's probably not the case in 90% of wildlife management. There's a lot of politicking that takes place. There's a lot of backroom discussions that are made. Promises are made. Threats are made. And you got to work through that. That's the bigger part of it. So actually, wildlife management, regardless of where you're at in this world, is more people management than it is wildlife management. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So you got to be a people manager in order to manage wildlife, and that's hard. That's not generally why biologists go into this field. They want to work only with the animals, and that's only a small part of the job. That's a job that makes you stay sane at the end of the day. I have to put it that way. So,
all right. So now, I guess I don't want to get too much into the politics of it, but how does the politics of it really affect your ability to help manage this whatever wildlife population it is, whether it's bears or deer or gray squirrels? Like, how does the politics really begin to affect your ability to do your job?
It affects it a lot. I mean, it's really involved, and I'll give you an example. We as biologists, our job is to come up with the data that backs up our decisions on how to best manage a population. And here in the state of New Jersey, a lot of folks agreed with that. Especially early on, they didn't want a bear season. They didn't think we could have a bear season and not eliminate the bears entirely. And there's some folks that had some really strong opinions about that. And we also had a lot of folks that had a lot of money to back that up and a lot of influence to back that up. So, early on, 2003, when we had actually it was in 2000, we had our first proposal for bear season, and someone wanted to become the head of an administration in the EPA, in the Bush administration. So she shut down the season so she could show that she could do that kind of work and handle a controversial issue, so she could get a job in the administration, the Bush administration. So it's something as simple as that. She wanted a job somewhere else, and they told her she had to shut down the bear season. She threatened the Fish and Game Council and told them that if they didn't shut it down, she was going to dissolve them. And Fish and Game Council doesn't want that because they're the rule-making body for fish and game. And so they back down. And just like that, all the data, all the science goes right out the door. We had another instance, several years later, totally different administration. We walked in the door with a population estimate, sat it down on the desk. So this is how many bears we have in the northern part of the state. We need to start to control them. We've got people getting hurt. We've got animals being killed, houses being broken into. And the gentleman looked at us, took out a napkin. God's honest truth, it was a napkin. Because I gave the presentation. to the DEP commissioner that day, and told him that's what it was. This is the information we're basing our decisions on. Took that napkin out, wrote a number on it, slid it across the table, and he goes, "That's your population estimate. If I see any number other than that, you're all fired." Okay, so that's how decisions have been made in the past. It's ugly. It's not good. But part of the perseverance keeps the population managed because, we had really good sportsmen that backed us up. We had good science that backed us up. And then over time, we beat that stuff back, so it's a tough fight. It's a tough battle. There was times we didn't even have the outdoorsmen of this state were not on board for having a hunting season, not early on. We had to convince them that we needed a hunting season. So, thankfully, we've proven that, we can hunt bears in this state successfully. We're not going to wipe them out of existence. We have a great outdoors experience for folks such as yourselves, enjoy bear hunting. We've come a long way. Now it's pretty much accepted and not fought nearly as much as it had been in the past. So,
Chris, if I can cut in real quick, Kelcey, what would be the reasoning for why the commissioner would, what political, advantage or whatever else would that create? Like, why?
You'd have to ask him. There was some decision made higher than all of us that, they did not want to have a bear season. They didn't want to have a number that, alarmed people. I was never made privy to that, what it was. I was just shown the number that we were supposed to use, and that was the end of it. And, they made sure we didn't speak to the media so that we could tell our side of the story. They used the press office to manage the information. And, they controlled the dialogue, and that's the way it was, and of course, you don't spend 15 years of your life working on something to lose your job overnight. There's other ways you got to work around it. You got to fight the battles that are out there. And honestly, that was probably my favorite part of the job outside of working with bears itself or deer. I was lucky enough to work in the wildlife control unit, so I worked with all wildlife species. Was the challenge of the politics, working through those things, knowing that what I was doing was really a good fight for a good reason, and working with the sportsmen and getting them on board to support it and talking to people, doing lectures, educating folks, that was important stuff. And we never would have a bear season today if it weren't for all the work that, we did and my crew did. It took a team. It wasn't a singularity. It was a full team of people doing all of it. So, good people.
Now, I do kind of want to circle back to something where you were mentioning threats and whatnot. We all understand what the anti-community, the lengths that they're willing to go to hinder us doing what we love to do and participating in conservation. I kind of want to touch on that a little bit, and if you don't mind, I want to expand upon some of the challenges that you've really faced from the anti-community in throughout your career.
They were always a challenge. They were always fun. You couldn't go out in one of our vehicles and not get followed by somebody. There was times when I was being pursued by animal rights activists, and I'd have to call the local police department to put up a roadblock so I could drive through it, and they would close off the road, and so I could get away from them. There was times we had them, we would be out trying to dart a bear. Let's say we had a category 1 bear that had a collar on it that we needed to euthanize according to the policy. We had an instance once where an individual jumped in front of the dart gun, trying to stop, the technician from shooting the bear with a dart gun. Thankfully, the technician had the presence of mind to, back down and had the control. Otherwise, she would have been sleeping. Actually, she'd be dead. But it she's been in a lot of trouble. We've had to arrest a number of animal rights activists. We've had them lock themselves in our culvert traps in protesting. Numerous death threats. That's something that comes with the territory. During one of our first seasons, I believe it was 2003. The first real good, it might have been 2005. There was an instance where we were at the check station up in Wawayanda State Park, and it was the last day of the season, and probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 people showed up, animal rights activists. And we had a line of law enforcement officers. We had state troopers there. We had local police there. We had conservation officers there. We had park rangers there because it was in Wawayanda State Park. There's probably a line of at least 50 different law enforcement officers holding the line, holding the animal rights activists back. And there was a point where one of the police officers came to us and asked us if we had our state issued shotguns in our vehicles. And we said, yeah, of course we do. And he goes, I want you to go get them and load them. He says, we're not entirely sure we can hold this crowd back. It got that serious, and over conservation, over an animal that was legally harvested. So, those are the kinds of things we dealt with on a daily basis. I had a woman one time, we had to euthanize a bear up in Highland Lakes, and the bear had been breaking into homes, causing a lot of issues. And we finally cornered the bear because they had a radio collar on, chased it up a tree, and we were getting ready to tranquilize the bear and then euthanize it, of course. And I had a woman come up to me and looked me right square in the face and told me that she hoped I died right then and there. She wanted me to die, which if someone's never done that to you, it's a shock. You're kind of like, because there's a lot of adrenaline pumping, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of people around. You're trying to control the situation. And then to have someone walk up to you and tell you I hope you die today. It makes you think, what are you going to do to make that happen? Hopefully nothing. And ideally, nothing ever really happened that was serious. Now to say that, I'm going to actually put a little bit of a spin on that and let you know that the animal rights activists actually served a good purpose. All right. And I know that's going to come as a shock to a lot of folks, but animal rights activists do serve a purpose. And the purpose is they make state agencies stay on their toes. They make sure that the data is clean. They make sure the data is correct. They make sure that because they're constantly asking for it, they're constantly looking it over. You're constantly being audited to make sure all your stuff is, in good shape. So the purpose that they served, whether they know it or not, is that they made our work that much more impeccable. Every report that we ever did, all the data that we ever put there, we made sure we had all the data to back it up, all the sheets to back it up, all the evidence that we needed to make sure that what we were telling the general public and what we were doing for the general public was accurate. So that's their benefit to us as employees. So.
A lot to take in. That's
a lot of folks don't realize just how much work and effort went into getting guys a bear hunting season. There was an absolutely ridiculous amount of effort that went into it. And some of the sportsmen they were involved, but a lot of the guys that enjoy, and to no fault of their own, I'm not bad mouthing anybody here. They don't truly understand what it took to get a bear season in this state. In fact, Gary Alt, as I said earlier, was my mentor, and still is to this day. And he looked me straight in the face one day and says, "You'll never have a bear season in the state of New Jersey." He goes, "There's no way you will ever get past the politics to get a bear season. You'll never hunt bears in New Jersey." And that was the standard thought. The state of Pennsylvania felt that way. New York felt that way. Maryland. All these other states. They're like, well, good luck to you, but we really don't ever see you guys getting a bear season. And the simple fact that we're hunting bears annually now, basically a miracle, you know, and that's something we should always strive to make sure we never lose. Because it took a lot of work to get it.
So getting to that point where there was a hunt, what were other ideas floated to assist with the bear population? Were there any others?
Oh yeah, there's lots of ideas. Oh, we had all kinds of ideas. One of the more interesting ones is that folks wanted us to airlift food into the woods and drop mountains of food so the bears could eat that and not cause any problems. Immunocontraception was a big one. You know, we actually had to go through and work with a number of biologists, chemists, veterinarians, folks that were involved with immunocontraception. We tested immunocontraception here in this state on deer. We had to go through years of, you know, data collection on that to show that immunocontraception just wasn't going to get the job done. Immunocontraception doesn't work in people 100% of the time. What makes you think you're going to get bears to work, make it work? They wanted us to put all the bears in zoos. You know, literally hundreds and thousands of bears were supposed to go into a zoo. That was an idea that was floated. And I'm sure there's other ideas that give me a couple minutes, I'll come up with. But those were some of the more entertaining ones that we were given.
I remember hearing stories about airlifting bears from New Jersey into New York.
That was a good one. Yeah.
I heard that one.
That was a suggestion. Or move them out west. We're supposed to airlift them out west. You know, because someone saw sheep being airlifted out in Idaho or Montana or something of that nature, which they do, you know, out in Wyoming and places. Different application, totally different concept. You know, but unfortunately, the general public don't realize the limitations and why you're doing these different things. They just see a cool idea, and now that's the way to go. And politicians believe that crap. They'll believe anything if enough people tell them to, you know, because that's how they stay in power. So I get that out.
If I've learned anything from the media, if we want to keep a bear season and we need to ensure that people say, hey, bears are dangerous, we need to start giving more cocaine to the bears.
Yeah, that'll do it. And you know, there's actually a little bit of truth to that. That's not there was a time when make sure I get this straight, but Western states were using angel dust to knock grizzly bears out. All right, which PCB, which we know what that does to a human being when they're on it. They become super crazed, insane. And there was a number of biologists that died as a result of them using angel dust on tranquilizing bears. So there is a little bit of truth to that movie. Very little, but there is a little bit.
So we went from a little bit of truth to cocaine bears to now PCP bears, and then the residents now want paratrooper and air assault bears. This is,
dude, I told you this is a crazy conversation. I'm telling you. I mean, I'm telling you, you can go any direction you want. There's a story there.
I'm gonna take a line from Dave and just say, oh, man, I just want to go bear hunt.
Yeah, well, now you know what it took to get that. So, and what it takes to keep it. You know, all that research has to continue to continue backing it up. I mean, the number of lawsuits that have been filed, the amount of money spent on lawsuits. You know, Safari Club International. You know, some of these other, you know, big hunting clubs that help pay for some of that stuff. I mean, the lawyers, the big money has been spent, you know, getting where this is. And if you ask any other state, any other state, period, I doubt there's been this much money spent on, you know, getting a season established for a species that really there should never have been any question on. You know, it's not an endangered species, you know, like something out west or something down south or something of that nature. Just should never have happened. But our battle here in New Jersey actually helped Maryland get their bear season. We actually took the PETA and some of the animal rights groups didn't have enough money to battle both of us in both states. So they opted to battle us here in New Jersey because they thought they had a better chance of winning, which sometimes they did. But that gave Maryland the opportunity to get their bear season established because they left them alone. So, I mean, there's another instance of, what the folks here in New Jersey have gone through to actually help other states. So,
well, from what I understand, I believe we as bear hunters in New Jersey, we actually scored another legal victory very, very recently where I didn't read the full article yet, but I do believe that there was some legal attacks over, who was really pulling the strings down in Trenton about the bear hunting. And I believe conservation as a whole has prevailed in these legal battles. So it truly is a monumental effort. And from me, and I'm sure I'm speaking for Rob and all other bear hunters out there, we thank you for your life's work in helping preserve what we love to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but again, it wasn't just me. There was a lot of people involved. I just happened to be the guy in charge at the time. So, a lot of the responsibility fell to me to get the research done and make sure we had what we needed. So, but I appreciate that. And, that's why I stay involved, even though I don't work there anymore, I try to, get the sportsmen what they need to be successful, through, my baiting. I'll refrain from calling it a company because it's just a one-man show. So there's really not a company there, but it's more of a hobby more than anything else. But in educating, it's all about the education. The more education you can give, the better off people are, and that's what you guys are doing. You're educating folks, so you're part of the system.
Damn it! Does that make us the man?
It makes you special.
Yeah.
You serve a purpose.
So I did
it.
So I do want to ask you one question from one of our viewers before I turn it over to Rob and we get into a little more technical, if you can believe that we're going to get any more technical than we already have been. But is there, maybe an organization out there or a company or anything like this that maybe you would recommend that, our viewers can follow along with, maybe join or donate to, that'll help, help in this fight in keeping the New Jersey bear season alive?
Actually, there is, the Sportsmen's Federation. There's groups in every county here in the state of New Jersey, and also the Sportsmen's Alliance have done a phenomenal amount of work to, the Sportsmen's Alliance works with lobbyists down in Trenton to help. That's how you got Sunday hunting. Where's those guys? That's how you manage to get a lot of things. And you really need to talk to the guys that are involved with that. I mean, those guys know if anyone knows politics and how to manage those politics, is those folks. And get those folks and have them on. The stories they could tell you, I'm sure would. I just know this much compared to what they know. And what they've gone through to keep hunting in New Jersey. Because realistically, there's only about maybe 75,000 sportsmen in the state of New Jersey that hunt avidly, hunt all species. That number can be switched up and down all over the place. There's X number of bird hunters. There's a certain number of small game hunters. Combine them all together, maybe you got 75,000. All right, compared to over 9 million people in the state, you don't have a big voice. So but I will say, New Jersey sportsmen know how to speak up when it comes time to do so. They stand up, they go to the meetings, they go to the council meetings, they go, when there's a review of the council game code, more active than in a lot of states. A lot of states don't have the amount of interaction that New Jersey does, and should be very proud of that. That's their strong suit. They know when to speak up. So. those would be my suggestions. Get involved with those two groups. At the very least, join so that they have the numbers. Get the newsletter so you know what's going on. If you feel passionate about something, speak up. It's your right as a sportsman to do that.
Awesome.
Well said. So, Rob, if you want to get into some of the technicals, because I know you're chomping at the bit over there. I know you've been waiting for this for a while.
I thought we were getting technical. I mean,
This is nothing. This is.
I've got so many gears turning in my head right now. Bear hunting is a massive passion of mine. I got hooked on it, I don't know how many years ago. For me, it was just such a rush having those bears come in. And like deer, and I'm sure Chris, and I'm sure you also, like, we love these animals. Like, they're incredible, but they need to be kept in check in order to keep growing the population and have a healthy population. So nobody loves these animals more than the actual sportsmen who are hunting them, and putting food on the table. Mm-hmm. With that being said, I'm going to break right into it. What are your thoughts on the population? Has the population at this point kind of peaked, or is it just going to continuously grow until, something eventually drops out?
Well, no one knows what that eventually drops out looks like because it's never happened. So, like other species, when a population gets overpopulated, reaches their biological carrying capacity, usually disease steps in, or some other natural factor steps in and takes care of it if it's not controlled or managed by humans. Bears haven't seen that. Bears are a top end predator, essentially. They can adapt to just about anything. They can live just about anywhere. They can eat anything. Their immune system is phenomenal. Their inbreeding rate is lower than some human areas, unfortunately. So they're a tank. They're a machine. Would I say the population is still growing? It's still expanding. We are not controlling the population here in the state of New Jersey. In order to control the numbers in the state of New Jersey, you'd have to harvest in excess of 25% of the population annually. 25% basically just stabilizes the population. So we're not even, I think maybe we've hit that number once since we've had a season open. Generally, we're like under 10% of population. So no, the problem's only going to get worse. The bears are not going anywhere. There's going to continue to grow. It's growing slower, because the sportsmen are doing a really good job. The difficulty, unfortunately, with bear hunting is that not everyone wants to hunt bears every year. You guys are a unique breed. True bear hunters are a special kind of crazy, because most folks are one and done. They shoot one bear. They don't want to shoot anymore. Maybe they'll shoot a smaller one for the first bear. Then they're going to shoot a big one, and then that's it. To find guys that are willing to shoot a bear every year, just like they shoot, a dozen deer. The state of New Jersey, you can shoot almost unlimited deer in most places. So that option just isn't there. People don't want to do that. So, we're going to have a problem. We have a problem that needs to be addressed. There's a number of things that probably can be done, but it's going to be an issue. The management's going to be an issue for years to come. So the good news is you're always going to have bears to hunt, especially with all the private land that's out there right now. They ultimately become sanctuary locations, and bears learn to go there when the season starts. So, that safeguards the population, especially the breeding females. And they're, getting more difficult to hunt. These animals will start to catch on. They know when they're being pursued. They change their habits. They're not as easy to hunt as they were when we first had a hunting season. So there's a lot of dynamics there. That's why you have good biologists that are working in our, primarily because I trained them. least that, I'll take a little bit of credit for that. But they're also really good people that care. They care about the species, they care about the management, and you guys got a good sound backing, to keep the population in check and try to at least. But it's going to be a challenge. There's no question about that. It's going to be a challenge.
So with that being said, and
before you do that, Rob, I want to ask this question. This came from the audience as well. Kelcey, I guess this would be more opinion based. I don't know if it's necessarily fact based, but in your opinion, do you think that the younger generations of hunters are hesitant to start bear hunting? Whether it's a fear of backlash or the unknowns of bear hunting versus being exposed to deer hunting, is there something to it that maybe is a roadblock that's preventing younger hunters or new hunters from getting into bear hunting?
That's a really good question. I don't know. And I'm going to take a stab at answering that, and I have nothing to back it up. Like, I have no data to back this up whatsoever. But just talking with bear hunters and kids that are bear hunting and getting into it, first of all, you're dealing with a very small group of people that bear hunt. Okay, of that 57,000 or 75,000 hunters that hunt here in the state of New Jersey, less than 10,000 are bear hunters. Okay, because we make 10,000 bear permits available every year, and we never get rid of 10,000 permits. Okay, and that includes all the out-of-staters that come hunting in the state of New Jersey. So we really have a small subset of people that actually hunt bears that live here in the state of New Jersey. And then you take that, and there's some apprehension. I don't. We've got some fathers out there that are taking their young kids out to go bear hunting and been very successful. I've had some first-year hunters go out and, get a bear, and they're hooked. They're hooked for life. I have also had some kids that are scared to death of that concept, and they got to kind of get a little older and before they get into it. So there's a little bit of truth, I think, what you were saying on both ends of it. But I think it's just such a small number of people in the first place that that's probably a bigger part of the problem. That's if I just had to take a stab at it, honestly. I mean, I don't think there's a stigmatism. I think we got past that stigmatism. I've dealt with a bunch of kids, taken a bunch of kids out hunting and got their first bears. To be quite honest with you, I think the kids do a little better job than the adults do. The adults tend to freak out more than the kids. The kids can be a little more steady and hold it together. Because I've seen some adults just absolutely come unglued. So I don't know. That's my take on it, I guess. Right, wrong, or indifferent.
I'm sure another, I don't know if you want to call it an issue, and maybe I'm also part of the problem, where now that I'm hunting, like, I will see 3, 4, 5 bears and I will pass them.
Sure.
Waiting for that mature boar that I want, so in a way, I'm not helping with the population, as much as I could be if I just took the first one that came through, but I'm sure that's probably also been an issue for, a lot of hunters.
Well, no, it is. I mean, and I talk to a lot of hunters, and it's not an issue. It's a preference, I mean, you want to shoot an adult animal, you don't, in any wildlife management situation, about 40% of everything that's harvested is a subadult animal, less than 2 years of age. So deer hunting, turkey hunting, whatever kind of hunting that you're doing, about 40% of everything that's harvested is subadult, which means it's essentially right there, possibly breeding age, but not net. Essentially, it's the surplus of what's out there, and it's less knowledgeable, usually easier to harvest. And that's why you harvest typically, younger animals. Bear hunting's no different. If you look at the sizes and the ages of the bears, generally they're smaller, younger animals. Those aren't the animals. You got to get the surplus, but then you also have to get some of the older animals in order to control the population. Well, bears aren't easy to harvest, especially those big boars and the older females. They've kind of caught on, especially with the regulations we have now, where you can't harvest a female with cubs. That's only making the management of the season that much more difficult. And again, that was a political decision. That was not a biological decision. No biologist would make that decision openly, especially if you're trying to manage the population. You got to harvest the females and control those numbers. So again, there's a case of politics causing a problem. But I think I forgot where we were headed with that. But I don't see it as an issue for guys that want to harvest an adult animal. Bears are interesting in the respect that they can both be polygamous and polyandrous. Polygamous being one male breeding numerous females, polyandrous being one female breeding with numerous males. Okay, and then every cub within that litter can have a different sire. So that's also which helps control the inbreeding rate within the population, making them much more healthy. And we've documented that here in New Jersey. That actually happens. You can have a female that has 5 cubs, and all 5 of those cubs can have a different father. All right, so you got to control the females. Is what I'm trying to explain. You don't control the females, you're not going to control the population. That's just all there is to it. And right now, sportsmen can't do that.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a lot of the rules and laws that are in place now for bear hunting also, I think, are affecting the numbers, where, what does it have to be, a bear over 75 pounds or 50 pounds or 75 pounds dressed or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Right.
The same with, hunting over bait, having to be 100 or 150 yards from the bait pile. Things like that. Definitely, the same with now.
And again, that's politics.
Yeah.
I'm sure those were not recommendations made by the biologists, by the Division of Fish and Wildlife. Those are recommendations that were agreed upon by the politics. They had to concede something to get the season reopened. Well, it's better to harvest some animals than no animals. So Fish and Game Council needed to do what they needed to do to get the season back going, and they did. Is it exactly what they want? No. But hopefully with a change in the administration, they can talk some sense into the new group of people, hopefully Republican, fingers crossed. They can talk some sense into those folks and really have a hunting season that's going to be more beneficial for the state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
That would be the hope.
Yeah. Moving on, talking about the population still. I know, being where we are in, the Hudson Valley area, lower New York, we always hear about the high numbers of bears in New Jersey. Like, it's just being in the hunting world, like, you hear about it. There's obviously no walls separating New Jersey from New York, but I feel like you don't hear that same talk in our area in New York. I mean, I feel like we're hearing about more bears, but not at the rate of New Jersey. Are they just not moving as far as they could? Or are they staying in the areas that they are? What are your thoughts on that?
The density of bears is probably much higher in New Jersey, for sure. I mean, there's no question about that. And the way bears operate is, these animals, they're born in January, they spend a year and a half with the sow. At the end of that year and a half, the males are booted out. She chases them away. And the female yearlings basically attach to the females, the sow's territory. So the females don't really leave. So what you end up having is a female-dominated population. Whether we still have that or not, I don't know. I would suspect we probably do, given the fact that all I ever do is hear from sportsmen that see nothing but females with cubs on their baits or in their hunting area. So as these surplus young adult males disperse, they're moving into Pennsylvania, they're moving into New York. And what Pennsylvania has done specifically is they've increased their hunting season rates, their harvest rates. They've got an early archery season. They have a special muzzleloader season for bears. So they've ramped up their hunting to control the numbers that are coming from New Jersey. I don't know as much about New York. I would imagine that probably the same thing is happening there, or guys are taking advantage of it more. I know a lot of guys that want to shoot a bear in New York come down, right on the New Jersey border. It doesn't take a lot of effort to shoot one by doing so. So bears are distributing themselves. They are moving into New York and Pennsylvania. New York and Pennsylvania are trying to control those numbers with their hunting seasons. And what you're seeing even more so now is that, bears are moving further south here in New Jersey. We've got bears in all 21 counties now. Their numbers are small, down in Cape May and places like that. But they're there. They've been there for, 10 years now. So that's where they're going. We've had bears go into Connecticut. We've had bears go to New Hampshire. We've had bears go to Maryland. Tag bears that we've had here. So they are dispersing and moving around. It's just other states are controlling it better than we are.
Now, I kind of have a question about that, and it's from a biological standpoint, because now imagine northern Jersey, and I'm talking, West Milford, that area where we're kind of bordering right up to New York and like Warwick area and things like that. You hear about, just as Rob said, these great bear populations in New Jersey, but right across that geographic border, and the bears didn't read the map, so they don't know where the line is. But getting into to kind of what Rob was saying, I don't hear about people in Warwick or in that area of New York really harvesting a lot of bears or big bears or anything like that. And I don't hear about big populations of bears. Now, is it something that biologically the bears are moving south? I don't know, because of it's a more temperate climate down in Atlantic City than it is in the northern New Jersey. Is there something to that they're pushing south rather than pushing north or east?
No. I mean, east they're being stopped by,
well, the Hudson River.
Well, the Hudson River doesn't stop them, but there's just nothing there. There still has to be a little bit of habitat for them to really survive. And of course, people aren't going to go live. Bears don't, I'm trying to think of there's a little strip of woods right along the Hudson River. I wish I had a map right now, but we have a population of bears that's there. There is some that hang out in that area.
Like
I think
if you happen to find that, I would be very interested to know where this place is.
Probably Alpine Palisades, somewhere over there.
Yeah, that's where you're at. We've had bears in there before. The only thing I can honestly say is, I know Pennsylvania has issues with bears coming from New Jersey over. We are controlling the numbers a little bit. We've slowed the population a little bit, so we're not seeing as much movement out of the state. All right, but there is still some movement, and New York doesn't keep track of numbers like Pennsylvania or New Jersey does. Their management style for wildlife is a lot different than, what we do here in New Jersey or even in Pennsylvania, where it's a lot more hands-on. They do a lot more survey work. And I know back, when I was in charge, they worked through Cornell University, and they send out surveys every so often and ask the people, so do you think there's too many bears here? Do you think there's not enough bears here? And if people say there's too many bears here, then they increase the permits. They increase the hunting. If people are saying, nope, we like the number of bears that are here, then they let it ride. So you probably aren't going to hear a whole lot in New York State because they don't really have any hard numbers to go by. As far as, how many bear problems are they having? How many bears are breaking into homes? How many bears are getting hit by cars? Their numbers aren't as robust, I guess, as some of like New Jersey or Pennsylvania is. And I'm sure we are, we have guys that are controlling the numbers, to a degree.
I can
I
can definitely say in New York, from what I've heard, is a lot of people that kill bears, it's more the opportunity arose. Like a lot of people aren't going out hunting these bears, but if something comes by, they'll shoot it. Because in New York, unlike New Jersey, you can't bait here. I know I've said it before, the DEC is not your friend.
it makes it challenging. Yeah.
They're important. Don't get me wrong. They are very important, to keep everything in check and keep people in check,
sure.
But that's from my kind of being in the outdoors for however many years now. It's more of like nobody's really that I know of going and outwardly, I'm going to hunt bears this weekend in New York,
Right.
It's not easy. It's not the same as being in New Jersey, where, like you said, the population is just, I think I had 4 or 5 bears on camera the other day in one spot.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, next question. Would you say black bears are more or less dangerous than other bears?
They're definitely less dangerous. Definitely. That's not to say they can't be dangerous, but they are less dangerous. Yes.
All right. Another question that I actually already had written down, but somebody asked from the crowd. Do bears display any type of behavior before charging or being aggressive? What are your thoughts? So for anybody that's a hiker on here, hunter, guys that do mountain biking, stuff like that, please educate all of us on what to be aware of, what to be,
Sure.
What can we learn?
No, that's a really good question, because a lot of folks have watched the Disney Channel and they have a totally misperception of what bear behavior is. So,
That's 100% correct, because when I was a kid, I thought bears lived in the jungle.
Well, there you go. And maybe at one point in time they did. We do have bears, sun bears, and Asiatic bears that do live in jungles. They're black. So, they are a subspecies of black bears, but that's not 100% inaccurate. and Asiatic bears.
So bears like PCP and cocaine, and they do live in the jungle. I've learned a lot tonight.
And the ones over there are a lot more aggressive than the black bears here. Like the bear. I don't want to get my facts too mixed up, but they're real threats over there. They're very aggressive. They do have some serious issues with them over there, killing people. So, we don't have that issue. Our bears are, a lot more conditioned to the humans that are around them. But, when a bear stands up on its hind legs, as a general rule, that's them getting a better look at things. They're trying to see what's going on. That's not an act of aggression. When a bear's on all fours with their ears pinned to the back of their head, just like a dog, all right, that's a sign that, they're not happy about something. And then what they're going to do next is they're going to chomp their teeth really loud, clack their teeth. They're going to slap the ground really hard. They're going to exhale through their nose and their mouth. And it's going to sound really impressive, really, really intimidating. You're going to have an involuntary response, and the hair on the back of your neck's going to go up. Okay. You're not going to dismiss that action for anything other than that. Okay. That is their way of telling you that you're too close. They don't want you there. They want you to get away from them, to move on. You're in their way. The next thing that they're going to do, if you opt to stand there, is they're going to charge you. They're going to come running at you full speed, and then they're going to stop just shy of running you over. And then they're going to slap the ground again, and then they're gonna woof and chomp their teeth really, really, really loud. And if you're still standing after that, all right, which most folks have done many things other than stand at that point, they may swat at you. All right, they may hit you, they may try to run you over or push you out of the way, something of that nature. As a general rule, those are all signs that you should have taken as, let's leave. Okay, you should have left the area by this point, gotten out of the area, yelled, screamed. You know, if you have a bear that's being aggressive like that, yell, scream, throw rocks, throw sticks, you know, be aggressive, jump up and down, do jumping jacks, make yourself look bigger than you really, really are. Any of those things is acceptable behavior to do. You know, that'll intimidate them. Black bears are very easy to intimidate. In the event that one does make contact with you, all right, you don't roll over and play dead. If you roll over and play dead with a black bear, you're gonna be dead. All right, you want to fight back. You know, you want to punch them in the face, poke them in the eye, punch them in the nose. That'll bring tears to their eyes, literally, and they'll back off. And then it gives you a chance to jump up and take off. You know, and we've had people do that. You know, we had a ballerina once here up in Vernon. She got, you know, chased by a bear, actually got tackled from behind and knocked her down. And inadvertently, she spun around as the bear was standing over top of her. And when she spun around, she elbowed the bear right at the end of the nose. And it backed that bear off. And she got up and ran away.
Wow.
But she literally was run down by the bear and tackled. And she still had the paw marks on her hip where the bear grabbed her from behind. So those are the things that you can do to protect yourself. Should that go south on you. Females will make another sound. And it's really, I'll try to make the sound for you, but if you hear this sound, you're really too close. All right. And they usually save this for adult male bears that are trying to breed them, that are, you know, they don't have any interest in, or they're trying to fight another bear off or something of that nature. That's generally when you hear this sound, but it's something like that's a female, really uptight, trying to, you know, get the message across. It's time to leave. You know, and the best way to leave is to, you know, back away, don't make eye contact. You know, don't throw at food or anything of that nature. You know, that's just going to make them come closer. And again, you know, pick up a stick, throw some rocks, you know, be aggressive, yell, scream, things of that nature, and you'll be fine. I mean, and these are all, you're probably going to get struck by lightning before any of these things take place. All right, especially recently with all the lightning strikes we've had. So you're probably, you know, more than safe. We've had, you know, far too many lightning strikes to get away with, but those are the things to look for. You know, 99.9% of the time, bears are going to take off, go the other direction. They don't have anything to do with you. Further away from you. If you do see one on the trail, just kind of keep an eye on them at a distance. Try not to, you know, do something stupid by getting in their way. And if they are coming closer, then you just need to get further. You know,
are more mature bears more dangerous than younger bears? And are sows with cubs as dangerous as all the stories that you always hear?
The most predatory bear on humans is probably around 300 pounds. They're like slightly larger than a subadult bear, but it's not, you know, king of the jungle, as it were, a really big boar. Those are the ones that are kind of transient, you know, looking for food. They don't really have a home range per se. Not necessarily. And they're generally, if you look at the people that have been seriously injured or killed, it's generally by a 300-pound nature type male bear. Females with cubs, you know, there's something to be aware of. People have been seriously injured by females with cubs, yes, but they're probably doing something really stupid, you know, trying to grab a cub or got too close to the cubs or something of that nature. And generally she's going to try everything she can to scare you off or move you off, something of that nature. Not as dangerous as Disney makes it sound. You know, if you get between a female and cubs, you're not a dead person. You know, not necessarily going to come tear you apart. She probably will let you know she's there. All right. But I've been between females and cubs a lot, and not the most dangerous situation you'll ever be in. Be aware of, but not the most dangerous you're going to be in.
Don't make friends with baby bears.
That's a really, really good piece of yes.
I'm curious, what is the largest bear that you've come across?
Largest bear I ever physically darted weighed 830 pounds, and that was in the February of 2015. And that bear was actually
What were the GPS coordinates?
he's still out there. From what I understand, he's still out there. So
yeah, but those older big bears, they're so hard to get.
they're smart.
Yeah.
Very, very smart. You don't get big without being smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be the biggest bear I've ever
I'm gonna start saying that.
tranquilized.
Use that as a life statement there.
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm gonna start using that as a life statement. You don't get this big by not being smart.
It's just a fact of life. Just a fact of life. But yeah, no, there's some really bear there. I mean, we have, the perfect conditions for it. Unfortunately, we do have an awful lot of human-derived food. So bears are never starving like they are out west, where they really struggle to maintain the weight. That doesn't happen here. And we have really good habitat. We have a very diverse habitat. If one food source dries up and isn't there, there's always something else to take its place. So the bears are never really left without some form of food to take care of business. And of course, us humans provide more than enough food that we shouldn't, but we do.
So we're close to that hour mark at this point. So I'm going to ask one more question and then turn it back over to Chris. Do you have a specific story that has stayed with you the most out of dealing with these bears? Like, do you have something that's really kind of stayed with you, either a traumatic situation or a funny situation, or like what's something that you've always held on to? Most memorable.
I could write a book on the most memorable times, because every time you go out and work with a bear is a memorable experience, because you learn so much from them all the time. I know that's kind of cliche, I suppose, for answering your question, but if I had to, I know I told you the one story, and I'm trying to think of one to throw you a curveball here. So, probably the most memorable story was probably like, well, I guess I'll tell you that one, all right, because the other ones are going to take too long to explain. So we had a bear that was in mountain lakes. It was underneath someone's house. It made a den middle of the winter underneath someone's house. Of course, the homeowner didn't realize that the bear was there. And he was playing Elton John records, and he was sitting at his dining room table. And every time he turned on the Elton John record or played a new song, something would hit the floor and literally knock his chair up in the air and almost knock him off the chair. And couldn't understand what it was. So he, would go over, and of course the record had jumped off, whatever it was playing. So he put it was an old-fashioned record player, is what I'm trying to say. And start the record player back up, and something knocked the floorboards, so hard that it almost knocked the chairs over, messed up the record again. So he had, a friend of his who was into, house maintenance, whatever. He goes, I don't know what's going on. You got to look underneath my house. I don't want to look underneath my house. You had the little crawl space where all the pipes and stuff were, typical crawl space for underneath the house. Guy looks underneath there, and sure enough, there's a bear at the far end of the house, all nested up. And it was a big bear. And every time the guy turned on Elton John, that bear would just stand up and ram its head into the floorboards just as hard as he could. You know, it was really making a racket. And really freaked the guy out. So the guy called us, it's fishing game, and asked us to come out and take a look and hopefully move the bear because he wanted to listen to his records. And so we came out. There's 4 of us that day. And we're pretty attuned to taking bears out from underneath houses. There's a technique for doing it, you know, to get them out and safely so no one gets hurt. Now, there's a lot of pipes underneath this house, a lot of cast iron pipes for the sewer drains. And at the far end of the one side of the house, or underneath the crawl space, it actually opened up directly into his kitchen. So I put one technician there so that the bear, when he got up and probably was going to leave the crawl space, wouldn't go into the guy's kitchen. And I crawled in to get the initial dart into the bear, and then hopefully he would fall asleep inside. About 50% of the time they do. You know, they just curl back up and go to sleep. The other 50% of the time, they decide they're going to leave. And there's not a whole lot you're going to do to stop them from doing that. So crawled in there, and there was another person outside, you know, kind of talking and communicating with the rest of us, so keeping an eye on stuff. Because we are in town. There's houses all over. I mean, they're literally in town of Mountain Lakes. And so I go in, crawl in there. I see the bear, put the first dart in the bear. He stands up immediately. And he's a really big bear. He's over 500 pounds. He's a really, really nice bear. And he starts walking towards me. Now, I'm belly crawling underneath this house. And I have a Dan Inject rifle that has 2 rifle barrels on it. So I have at least one more dart that I can shoot. The bear sees the opening where my technician is standing that goes into the kitchen. And he starts walking towards him, you know, because he's over there by the heater and, you know, the water softener and all that sort of stuff. So he's like literally walking. He's going to go right into the kitchen. So my technician darts the bear, puts another dart into him. Well, of course, the impact of the dart forces him to take a look at me, because the only other way out from underneath this house is over top of me at that point. So this is when I decide it's time to leave. So I start crawling backwards as fast as I can. And the amount of time it takes me to crawl 10 feet, this bear has gone 15 feet. All right. He's really traveling, which you wouldn't think a bear of that size could travel over cast iron pipes that easily without breaking them, but he could. I mean, he was like a ghost. He was skinnying through there so fast. And the last I had looked up, now mind you, this whole thing has taken less than 30 seconds. Okay, this whole story that I'm telling you. When I looked up, all I saw was a bear's nose about 2 inches off the end of my dart gun barrel. All right, he's coming, whether I'm there or not. He sees the opening. He's going to go through the opening. Of course, the opening is a window well that goes into the little circular, half circular area that protects the window well under the crawl space. And then there's a rhododendron bush right next to that. So I look up again, and this bear is like literally on top of me. So I pull the trigger and I dart the bear again. So this is the third dart that goes into him right in the chest, which stops him for a second. Just enough time for me to get through the window. And I try to roll out of the way. And as I roll out of the way, I roll right into the rhododendron bush. All right. I can't get away any further. I turn back around and I look, and there's the bear. I mean, he's literally on top of me. And I'm not a small guy. I probably weighed 270 at the time. I don't weigh that much anymore. But he calmly reached down, picked me up by the foot, just above my ankle, picked me up in the air, at which point, in my mind, I was convinced I was about to die. All right? I was literally seeing my life flash before me. He just picked me up and tossed me to the side like I was a rag doll. Like literally just tossed me out of the way. Never broke stride, never got uptight, just kept right on walking. Just walked right on by me, walked about 150 yards, and fell over asleep. That would probably be the most intense situation I've ever been in with a bear. And at no point was I ever really in trouble. You know, I mean, had he wanted to, he could have. You know, and if you looked at my leg, I still have the scars from where he never broke skin. It was just the compression of his canine teeth killed the skin on top. So I have 4 impressions of canines in my leg. Never ripped the jeans, never ripped the long underwear, never even ripped my sock.
Wow.
You know, there was never anything. It was just the pressure that he exuded on my leg. Basically left me with indentations on my leg. So could he have killed me? Sure. Did he? No. And that's a good lesson to learn when working with bears, is that if they want to, they can, but 99% of the time, they're not.
How many cc's did it take?
1,500 pounds worth before he went to sleep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It took, and of course his adrenaline was pumping. You know, even though he didn't seem excited, he was pumping. So the nice thing about the drugs these days, you know, you can overdrug an animal and they're just going to sleep a little bit longer. And of course we had reversal drugs that we could give them, and it's totally safe. So modern chemistry has done great things for wildlife management. But that one of many stories, and if you guys let me come back, I'm sure we'll give you some more stories to talk about.
Absolutely.
So I gotta ask, what song did he not like?
I never asked him that question. I just know it was Elton John. He was not a fan of Elton John.
I'm probably gonna have to take this video off YouTube and edit. Like, this is a great story, but I'm probably gonna have to edit this out, because now we're gonna have the antis running around in the woods with boom boxes, just blasting Rocket Man all day.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's possible. I honestly, you know, I there's so many stories, and I know he wanted to go, but you know, there was really quick. There was a story that it's not even mine. It's Gary All's. He was working over in Pennsylvania, and he got a phone call from a homeowner, and he's like, "Look, our water doesn't stay on. The plumber says there's a bear underneath there. Can you come take a look? You know, we're having, sometimes the water's on, sometimes the water's off. We don't know what's going on, but you know, we got to get this bear out from underneath our house." And so Gary Out goes out and as the story goes, looks underneath because it's a seasonal cabin. It's not there all the time, if I remember correctly. And a female had climbed underneath there and gave birth, and the cubs were playing, and they were turning the water valves on and off. And that's how to get that water inside. So, you know, sometimes they like to play tricks on people.
That's funny.
Make their life more challenging. But
So that's another lesson. Instead of putting out bait, Rob, let's just go put out some plumbing, and then we'll just get the cubs used to coming by.
they can just turn the water on and off. Yeah,
That's it. They'll start showing up, and they'll just know that, hey, we'll come over here and play a little bit.
exactly.
Funny.
That's all you got to do. Those are the secrets.
That's
So,
funny.
but,
All right.
So I do, before we go, I do want to ask you one question that I ask of every guest, and you know, this is completely tailored to you. So, but what are 3 things? I mean, aside from license, weapon, things like that, but if you're out in the woods or you know going on pursuit, what are 3 things that you have to carry with you every time?
is this a quiz or a test that I got to pass? Is that,
No.
or is this just what I personally carry on myself whenever I go out?
Elton John on your iPod, a bag of PCP, and plumbing.
And plumbing. See, I would never. I just told those stories, and I wouldn't have gotten the answer to that question. So, but yeah, you can never go wrong with those 3 things. Never, never go wrong.
All right. Well, listen, I know we talked a little bit before the show, and I know we're kind of just scratching the surface here, and I know there's a lot more that we could talk about when it comes to bears, especially Rob. He could probably sit here for the next 6 hours and talk about this. But you know, we'd love to have you back on, and I know there's a lot more stories. And we didn't
even get into Swizzlestick.
I told you I'm a lot more interesting than everybody.
But I'll give you a quick plug. Anybody that's listening right now, if you bear hunt in New Jersey, Northwest, North Central, whatever, you're going to want to call Kelcey. Go over, pick up the bait. For me right now, I swear that is making a world of difference in my 8 bait sites that I'm using. Bears are loving it, and they're loving everything. And that's a whole nother story that we can get into on the next one.
Well, that's just because I haven't gone out there and put the pipes out there. Once I put the pipes out there with the wrenches,
okay,
those baits.
You won't even need me anymore. You
could just start selling those.
You don't have to open up the plumbing supply store.
Valves. That's it. All you gotta have.
Oh God. No, but Kelcey, thank you so much for taking some time out to chat with us tonight, and hopefully we can continue this conversation in another episode because I know there's a lot more to talk about, and this is a very hot button issue even today. So we'd love to have you back on, and we'd love to hear more from you when it comes to everything bear hunting, because that's something that Rob and I love to do, and I know a lot of our listeners are bear hunters as well. So this is something that we'd love to continue the conversation on.
Sure, anytime. I'd love to. Like you said, you can never shut me up. So it's glad to help out any way I can, and there's lots more stories.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, again, Kelcey, thank you for coming on. Rob, thank you for filling in on Dave's night off. But we're going to have a team meeting and vote to cut his vacation next year. It's been too many PTO days. I've burned up all of mine, so I'm locked in for the rest of the year now. I got to show up. You're going to stop paying me at this point. But thank you everybody who tuned in tonight. Real quick, if you haven't already, head over to dscnortheast.org. DSC Northeast Annual Banquet will be on Saturday, September 13th at the Avon Old Farm Hotel in Avon, Connecticut. Tickets are going fast. Listen, you don't want to miss your chance to win a lot of hunting trips, fishing trips, firearms, gear, and more. Please head over dscnortheast.org. Get your tickets now. It'll be a great event. I'll be there. Rob will be there. We'll have a good time.
Yep.
Tonight's episode was brought to you by Cutright Mobile. Cutright Mobile app. Elevate your wild game experience. All right. Expert videos from everything from field dressing to butchering to cooking. Brought to you by our friend Mike Edgehouse and Got Game Tech. You can find the app in the App Store. Cutright Mobile. Can't miss it. We use it. We love it. Please check it out.
Yep.
Follow them on Cutright Mobile on Instagram. Just check it out.
Yep. Also check out American News Magazine, American Outdoor News Magazine. That's another one. And also check out United Bow Hunters of New Jersey. When you sign up with them for a year, you get nationwide insurance coverage that also goes up into Canada. So check out United Bow Hunters in New Jersey.
There you go. You heard it there. So please do everything you can. If there was one lesson from tonight, I'm going to steal one more line from Dave. Your vote matters. All right. If we learned anything from tonight, your vote matters when it comes to conservation. So please do everything you can to help protect the sport that we all love. With that, I wish everybody a good night. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. And listen, Kelcey, again, thank you for taking the time out and share some of the stories. And we're looking forward to having you back. So,
Kelcey, tell us where we can find you.
448 Penwell Road, Fort Murray, New Jersey, is where I keep all the bait. Or you can call me at 973-459-8064. Always there to answer questions and help anybody out if it needs any help. So come see me.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Be safe out there. Hope everybody's getting ready for this. We're in the dog days of summer. Hunting season is right around the corner. I know I got to get out there and start getting ready. Please be safe. Get out there. Let's keep it going. Thank you, everybody.